Gittin Daf Pei begins with the Mishnah that starts at the bottom of Daf Ayin Tes, a very lengthy Mishnah, and it contains the Gemara's complete comments on that Mishnah all the way until just before the next Mishnah. So the Mishnah discusses what happens when a person writes a get in a puzzle way. There's something wrong with either with a number of different factors, and the Mishnah will describe what is the halacha if she uses again, she gets married with it. Obviously, she's not allowed to marry the second person. The Gemara will say, though, you do have to be machmer as if she was, and we'll have a number of different halachas that were machmer on her all the way. So let's begin the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says there's a number of things that could be wrong with the get that would make it puzzle. First is if the date, which is counted according to the years of the kingdom, if they use the wrong kingdom. So the Mishnah is written in Vavel, which is under an empire there. It's not under the Roman Empire. And the Mishnah begins and it says, if you wrote it under a kingdom which is not appropriate, which the Gemara says refers to the Romans, which is a kingdom which existed at the time, but the author of this Mishnah was not there. So if you wrote it under the wrong rulership, or if you write it under the Median kings or the Greek kings, which were not around anywhere at the time anymore, or if you write it counting years from the building of the Beis HaMikdash or even from the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, all these are psul to the get. Second psul, the Sefer, the Gemara explains, has to write where he is, has to write where the get is written. And if he wrote the wrong place, if he was in the east and he wrote in the west, if he was in the west and he wrote in the east, it's puzzle as well. Now, these situations are all the psulim that the Mishnah starts with. Later, the Mishnah adds in, or if you miswrote his name, her name, the name of his city, or the name of her city. It adds this into the following halachas as well. Now, the Mishnah now continues and it describes what the halacha is, and then it adds other cases where you have a similar situation, not because of a psul to the get. So the halacha is that, of course, her first get was no good. It's not a suffix. The get was no good, therefore she remains married to her first husband. If she got divorced based on this get, it was not valid. If she went and married somebody else, that is a marriage that's completely be'isr, and the children are mamzerim. However, the halacha is that we're afraid that people might not realize that. People might think she is married to the second one, therefore we don't let her depart from the second one just like that, and we don't let her go back to her first husband. So therefore she needs to leave both of them. And the halacha is that she loses her connection to both of them. She needs to be set apart from both of them. She loses all her rights to both of them. They lose all their rights to her, and everything is lost from the connection of her to both the first husband and the second husband that she married based on this puzzle get. And the Mishnah is going to go through the halachas with all of the specifics. So it says she needs a get from both of them. She has to get divorced from each of them. She does not get a ksuba from either of them because of the knas on her that you should have checked the get to make sure that it was okay. She does not get a return of her fruits. When she's married to someone, she gives over the fruits of her property in exchange for him redeeming her. If she's captured, so she loses that as well. She doesn't get that back at all. She doesn't get monetary support afterwards. She doesn't get to take home clothing that she brought into the marriage, which was worn out. If she did take any of these things from either of the husbands, she has to return it. Now, a child from each husband is a mamzer. Now, as far as their rights, they cannot be mitame to her if they were a kohanim. They don't get her found objects any longer. They don't get her earnings any longer. They cannot be made for her nidarim. If she was a bas Yisrael and she was married to a Kohen, she loses the ability to marry, even if she wasn't married to a Kohen, she loses the ability to marry Kohanim anymore because she's married to one man and she's together with another man. That's a din zona. If she was a bas Levi, she loses her right to meiser. That's another knas that was imposed. If she's a bas Kaini, loses her right to truma. Even though she goes back to her father's house, she can't eat a truma. She is not inherited by the sons of either marriage. They do not inherit her. They don't inherit her ksuba. Now, the Gemara explains in Yavam, she doesn't have a ksuba. What this means is the rights to her ksuba that her sons would get from their inheritance from their father. That is, if she dies in the father's lifetime, she never collects her ksuba, but her sons do collect that ksuba money. Ultimately, when they collect the inheritance from the father, they get a larger chunk in exchange for that ksuba, but now they lose that as well. Now, if each of them has a brother, so they die without a brother, she would fall to yibum to them. She can't do yibum, she has to get chalitza. Now, the Mishnah gives other cases where you have a similar halacha. So, First case is if you have two women who fall to Yibum. One of them is in Erva, one of the 15 Arayas to the Yavam. Therefore, she is pater from doing Yibum because, let's say, she's the daughter of the Yavam. Her tzara is pater as well. Now, if the Erva turns out that she was an islandess, which means she was never married to the original husband, to her dead husband in the first place, that marriage was an invalid marriage, was a mekach tais, and therefore the tzara who thought that she was pater from Yibum is not pater from Yibum. So that tzara, now if she went and married somebody else, she loses both. She has to get divorced from him, and she cannot marry the Yavam. She has to get divorced from the Yavam. The Gemara explains the Yavam. This is Rabbi Akiva, who holds that even though a Yavama marrying someone else is a lav, but he holds that it has the halacha of krisos according to Rabbi Akiva, and it causes mamzerim, and there's no tefillas kiddushin, and all those things. Now, all the other halachas apply as well. The Mishnah continues and says, now, if somebody does yibum to his wife, new case, he has a woman who is married to his brother, he dies without children, she falls into yibum, and then there's a tzara, and that's a co-wife, and she goes and she marries someone else randomly, because as long as one of the wives does yibum, the other one is freed. But then it turns out that the one that did yibum was an islandess, which means she never felt yibum in the first place. She wasn't even married in the first place. So that tzara who went to the shuk has all the same halachos. Now, if somebody wanted to divorce his wife, so the two of them went to a sefer and said, can you write for us, please, a get and a receipt? The get is to be given to the man, and he gives that to the wife to divorce her, and then she had a receipt written for her, and when she receives the payment for her ksuba, in a normal situation, she gives that receipt to the husband. So the sefer wrote the receipt as well as the get. He gave them to the man and the wife, but he got mixed up, and he gave the get to the woman instead of to the man, and he gave the receipt to the man instead of to the woman. They each swapped, and they gave the document to each other as they were supposed to without realizing. Then the man didn't realize he was giving his wife a receipt instead of a get, and therefore she's not really divorced. She went and she got married to somebody else, and then they opened up the documents and they saw that she had really gotten a receipt, not a get. So, of course, the same halachas apply. She's not divorced at all. She went and married the other one. She has to separate from him, and all the same halachas apply. But here you have a machlekes. Rabbi Elazar says that's only if it happens right away, if this revelation happens right away. If it happens sometime later, we're afraid that there's a shtick here. She's trying to get out of her marriage, and she made a plot together with him. And the Gemara will explain that more at length. So now we begin the Gemara. The Gemara explains when the Mishnah says a kingdom which is not befitting, it means the Romans. The reason it's called a kingdom that's not befitting is because it doesn't have a alphabet and it does not have a language. Ula says, what is the reason that a kingdom is written into the get? What is the reason that we calculate the date on the get by the local king? That's because we want to make peace with the kingdom. We want them to consider us to be being machshav them, respecting them by writing their king years onto our stars. So when I ask, just because you want to make peace with them, you're going to make a psol in the get? You're going to have her leave her husband and declare the child to be a mamzer? The Gemara says, yes, this is Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Meir we know holds, Rabbi Nuna says over, and Rabbi Meir would say that anybody who changes in the slightest bit from the specific design, from the mint that the Chachamim made for the Gittin, the child is a mamzer, and all these things happen. Okay, now that we want to know, why do you have to list all the different ways you could say the kingship wrong? We have to say the Romans, the Greeks, and the Medians, and you have to say the building of the Beis Hamikdash and the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara says is chiddush for each. If I would have just said the Romans, I would think that to write the name of the Romans, the actual kingdom is going to protest because the Romans are around. They are an existing kingdom. You're writing an enemy kingdom into your star. That's very bad, and therefore we would say that that's why you have to make up soul. But perhaps if he wrote the Medians and the Greeks are not around anymore, or they're defunct kingdoms, maybe he doesn't care. So the chiddush is that he does, and therefore you shouldn't. Now you have to go a step further and say even the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, which is not even a kingdom at all, it's just an event. Well, first we said the building of the Beis Hamikdash, that's just an event, that he would care about that also, and he wants you to use his kingship. And a step further than that would be, you may think that, the building of the Beis Hamikdash, you're celebrating something that was exciting when it happened, so he would be upset, he wouldn't want you to do that, but destruction, he wouldn't care because you're just mourning but we say no, he would care about that also, and therefore you can't do that either. Okay, next, the Gemara explains when it says east and west, it's not referring to the city in which the husband and the wife lived. That's mentioned later in the Mishnah. It's referring to where the Sefer is, and this is a halacha that we've seen. Rav told the Seferim, and Rav Huna told the Seferim, you should always write the place in which you are, not the place in which you received instructions. When you write the get, if you're in Shili and you got the instructions from Hini, you write Shili, and if vice versa, then you write Hini. Then you write wherever it is where you wrote the get, that's the place you write. Now, what we've seen so far is that even if you didn't write the kingdom, and it's only because we want to have peace with the kingdom that we have that written there, that is a reason to destroy the get, make it pasul gamri, and call the kids mamzerim if she gets married based on this get. So the Gemara, not everyone agrees to that. This Mishnah is only Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel says that actually the Chachamim disagree, and they say even if you just wrote it for the guy in the city whose job it is to know the borders and know who inherited what and all these halachas, if you wrote it for when he's been in the job and how long he's been in the job, that's also good. You don't have to have actually the king himself. The Gemara has an incident that happened over here. The Gemara says it was a get which was written with the name of the chief of all the servants of the king. So the Gemara says that Rav Nachman Bar Rav Chizda sent to Rabbah what would be the halach over here. So he sent back here, even Rabbi Meir, who says you have to use the king, would agree to this. He says, how is it different than the guy who knows the borders of the homes? That's also a servant of the king. So what's the difference? This servant of the king, you said that that's no good, and Rabbi Meir would argue, and the Chachamim would say yes, but we know that Rabbi Meir is arguing. But about the viceroy of the king, you're saying that there Rabbi Meir would agree if you count it from his years. The verse says no. If you use the king's chashav servant, so that's a praise for the king. That's a chashivas for the king. If you use the king's cheapest servant, why did you skip all the higher ranking servants and count based on his lowest ranking servants? That's an insult to the king, and therefore you can't use that at all. Now, this is the Gemara's first approach to what the Chachamim hold. The Gemara brings another approach to what the Chachamim hold. Because again, we only have Rameir quoted in our Mishnah. So the Gemara says that Rav Abba says the name of Rav Huna, name of Rav, that the Chachamim say the only thing they argue on is that they say that the child is not a mamzer. They agree that you can't use the get. They agree that it's possible, but they say the child's not a mamzer just based on the lack of kingship there. However, if you changed the names, if you wrote the names wrong, his name, her name, and the name of the cities, there they say that the child is a mamzer. It's only a special leniency for mistaking the kingship that the child is not a mamzer. So says the Gemara, we have a proof to that as well in our Mishnah, because the Mishnah doesn't put the names together with the kingship. It lists first the kingship, and then it gives all the halachos, and then it says, oh, and the names is the same. So obviously, that's someone else talking. Otherwise, it would have put it all together as one. That must be their Rabbanan, and the reason then they're saying it separately, and then the Rabbanan are agreeing that makes mamzeres. However, in the kingship, which is what was before, they're holding that it does not make mamzeres. Gemara now refers to the part of the Mishnah where we discussed a woman who was pater. She thought she was pater from Yibum because she was a tzaras erva, and then it turns out that the erva was an islandess, so she wasn't pater from Yibum. So Mishnah had said that if she went and she married someone in the meantime, she can't go back to do Yibum. She has to get chalitza, she can't go back to do Yibum. So the Gemara wants to know, is it only if she went and married somebody? What if she just went and she was mazaneh without a marriage? Can't she go back and do Yibum? So the Gemara has two opposite versions of this Gemara. So the first version is that the Gemara says, well, the Mishnah says it's only if she got married. That implies that if she just did znus, it would not be a problem. She would be able to go back to her first husband, and she would be able to go back to the yavam, that is. And the reason that marriage is worse is because if she went and she got married, people think she got chalitza, and that's why she was able to marry someone else. And if she went and she got married, and it looks like she got chalitza, and then she goes back to her yavam, it looks like you're allowed to marry someone after you've done chalitza. You're allowed to do